On Friday, May 14, 1993, Challenger 3985 is emerging from the shop building in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The engine is resplendent in a new coat of Imron paint. A new addition to the locomotive is the elephant ear smoke deflectors, or smoke wings, installed on the smoke box. This is the first time that this engine has worn smoke deflectors. Steam is being supplied to the locomotive from a steam generator in the boiler dorm car, which is sitting on an adjacent track. Preparations are underway to fire the locomotive up once the water in the boiler has warmed. Preheating water in the boiler greatly reduces the time needed to build a full head of steam after the fire has been lit. While the boiler water is being heated, crewmen attend to last-minute mechanical preparations prior to the engine's departure from Cheyenne. During the winter, much work was done to the engine in the locomotive back shop. Here we see the locomotive being ready to have some of its superheaters reinstalled. The superheater unit started to leak badly as the engine was returning from its stint on the CSX Railroad in the fall of 1992. The leaking superheater units had to be removed from the locomotive's front end before they could be repaired. With the work completed, they were tested and are now ready to be reinstalled. These crewmen are cleaning the steam pipe fittings which the superheater units will be reconnected to. The rust and deposits must be removed from the fittings so that they will not leak when carrying the full 275 pounds of steam pressure. Besides the superheater work, new fire brick was installed in the firebox. As it has always been, repairing and maintaining steam locomotives is hot, dirty work, usually accomplished in tight conditions. With its front end parked in a tight curve, the articulation of the Challenger engine is easy to see. The look of the engine in the smoke box area is considerably changed by the elephant ear smoke deflectors. This type of smoke lifter was used on some of the Challenger engines and on the 800 class Northern engines. Rolling black smoke indicates that the oil burner has been lit in the firebox. It won't be long now before the engine is ready to leave the shop area. With the steam pressure rising steadily, the line from the steam generator is disconnected. Last-minute mechanical problems have plagued the shop crew this morning. Less than an hour after the oil burner was lit, the engine has a full head of steam. With cylinder cocks open, the engine departs the shop area. The pilot truck and front engine unit on the Challenger are connected to the engine frame with a giant hinge pin. This allows the locomotive's front end to go through tight curves, with the rigid boiler protruding to one side or the other. This action is readily apparent as the engine comes through the curve. Today, Challenger 3985 will be pulling an empty passenger train from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Denver, Colorado. Today's trip will transport the engine and passenger equipment to Denver Union Station. This is in preparation for an historic excursion to take place on Saturday, May 15th. Before departing Cheyenne, the engine will couple to its auxiliary water and support cars. It will then pick up the passenger equipment and depart Cheyenne. Departing Cheyenne, trains immediately encounter the 0.82% grade of the new line over Sherman Hill on track number 3. Here we see the 3985 battling the grade at milepost 515.8. There is still a water tank at Spear, a reminder of the steam days. Here the train leaves the Laramie subdivision and enters the Greeley sub for the run south to Denver. The train speeds past grain elevators which stand sentinel along the track. Racing through Platteville, the special train makes full track speed as it heads south. The distance from Cheyenne to Denver is approximately 100 miles. South of Platteville, the 3985 and its train leave the siding after meeting a northbound hopper train. Notice the head-end crew leaning out of the cab of the 3985. They will notify engineer Steve Lee when the entire train is on the main line and he can begin to accelerate. The speed of the train is down to 20 miles per hour as it rolls through the industrial north end of Denver. Swinging off the main line, the 3985 and its train immediately roll through a Y before backing into the adjacent Union Pacific Intermodal Yard. As it rolls through the Y, the 3985 is making history. This is the first time that a Union Pacific Challenger engine has visited Denver since steam was dropped on the railroad in the late 1950s. Steve Lee has the Sanders running as the big engine negotiates the tight curvature in the Y. The 3985 was built for the Union Pacific Railroad in 1943 by the American Locomotive Works. The engine last saw service in 1957, pulling freight. For many years, it was stored at Cheyenne and was eventually put on display near the depot in 1975. Of the 105 Challengers built, it is one of only 2 that were saved. In 1979, the locomotive was taken off display and rebuilt in the back shop with volunteer labor. The Union Pacific consented to letting the engine enter excursion service, which it did in 1981, following the completion of its rebuilding. Built as a coal-burning engine, the 3985 powered trips primarily over Sherman Hill during the 1980s. In order to take the engine to more places on the railroad, the 3985 was converted to oil in 1990. The train backs into a track in the intermodal yard after successfully negotiating the Y. Here the train will be parked for the night. In preparation for its excursion duty on Saturday morning, the engine and train will be serviced during the evening hours. The 3985 and its passenger train are in Denver to celebrate 40 years of steam excursions on the Union Pacific Railroad. The first official steam excursion was sponsored by the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club on May 17, 1953. The trip ran from Denver to Laramie, Wyoming, and returned over Sherman Hill. The train was powered by Challenger engine 3967. On Saturday, May 15th, the long-awaited steam excursion is about to begin. Overnight, the 3985 has been renumbered to portray sister engine 3967, which pulled the original excursion in 1953. The 3967 was equipped with smoke deflectors, which explains why the 3985 has had smoke wings applied for this event. Like the original, today's trip is being sponsored by the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club. Almost 500 passengers will be on board the train, which has been sold out for almost 3 months. Steve Lee, Union Pacific Steam Operations Manager and 3967's engineer, discusses some last-minute details of today's trip. Departing Denver Union Station promptly at 7 a.m., the train threads its way through the Union Pacific Yard and by the many industries in North Denver. The first part of today's excursion is over the route of the former Denver Pacific Railway. This line was built between Denver and Cheyenne by the citizens of Denver to connect with the Union Pacific. Because the UP had bypassed Denver on its transcontinental route, the Denver Pacific Railway offered travelers the option to connect with the Union Pacific at Cheyenne. This line was completed in 1870. The Union Pacific later acquired the line, eventually rerouting the north end to join the main line at Spear instead of Cheyenne. The only reserved seating on the train were the extra fare seats in the 2 dome coaches and dome diner. This was the first space on the train to sell out for obvious reasons. All 3 dome cars were recently repurchased by the Union Pacific and rehabilitated for excursion service. Passengers in the dome coach Challenger enjoy the view as the train rolls along north of Brighton, Colorado. To accommodate the large number of passengers aboard the train, seats in the lounge car Sun Valley were sold for the day. This car was built by the American Car Foundry in 1949 and originally named the Colorado River. When built, the car had a barber shop, valet service, card room, plus bar and lounge areas. The car received its current name when it was completely rebuilt in 1989. Due to the lengthy 300-mile round trip, it was necessary to schedule the departure out of Denver at 7 a.m. Today's train consists entirely of lightweight streamlined cars built in the late 40s, middle 50s, and early 1960s. Most of these cars were used on Union Pacific streamlined passenger trains until Amtrak took over the nation's passenger train business in 1971. The first photo run of the day was made just south of Spear on the Colorado-Wyoming border. The last few miles of the line into Spear are on a steep grade. The engine put on quite a show as it climbed through a cut at the state line. At Spear, the train left the Denver line and joined mainline track number 3 over Sherman Hill. This track, which is used by most westbound trains, was completed in 1953. The grade on this track is only 0.82%, while the grade on the old line is 1.55%. Almost 10 miles longer than the old line, Track 3 completely eliminated the need for helper engines over Sherman Hill. Although construction was underway, the line was not completed when the original excursion was run. Snow fences lace the barren landscape as the 3967 works its way up the hill between MK and Lynch. In the background, a midday thunderstorm portends trouble weather-wise for the remainder of the day. Getting this many people on and off the train quickly was a tough job which the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club members handled very efficiently. The main concern for passengers both on and off the train was safety. Rain forced the cancellation of 2 photo run-bys. However, this did provide an opportunity for the passengers to enjoy a substantial and appetizing box lunch. Prairie grassland gives way to lodgepole pine trees as the train climbs higher. The highest elevation on Track 3 is 7,867 feet. An occasional ranch house borders the railroad along Track 3. At each photo location, club members carefully established and supervised the photo lines to allow everyone a good vantage point and to ensure safety for participants. With the water tank at Harriman in the background, the train makes a photo run-by through the signals at milepost 544.1. Seeking a higher vantage point, many photographers have climbed a steep hill strewn with rock outcroppings. Hoping that the sun would appear, the train waits several minutes before charging by the photographers. The sun has revealed itself for the second running of the same photo run. A sharp, cold wind is buffeting the train as it rolls across the fill west of Perkins, Wyoming. One of the more interesting cars on the train is the Union Pacific Museum car, the Promontory. The doors of the former baggage car can be opened, providing fresh air and an exciting view. Inside the car, model trains of various gauges can be found on display. In addition, other relics and memorabilia are prominently displayed throughout the car. This would include photographs of notable celebrities who rode Union Pacific passenger trains over the years, number plates and insignias from now-gone trains and engines, silver serving sets, and drumheads from famous passenger trains, such as the Portland Rose. The sky continues to look more threatening as the train approaches the outskirts of Laramie. Gathered in front of the engine at Laramie are passengers who rode the original trip in 1953. This made for an interesting reunion as camera shutters clicked, recording the gathering for posterity. Who in their wildest imagination could have predicted that this trip would be recreated 40 years later? The original 3967 was built by Alco in May of 1942. The engine was last used in revenue service in 1957 and then stored at Cheyenne awaiting disposition. The locomotive was scrapped in March of 1960. Passengers and local residents watch as crew members service and fuel the locomotive. In addition to water, the engine took on fuel supplied from a truck. Departing Laramie, our camera takes you in the cab of the 3967 for the ride over Sherman Hill. Fireman Lynn Nystrom checks the various valve settings and gauges prior to starting up the hill. Before leaving Laramie, the train was turned on the Y for the return to Denver. Prior to departure, a steady rain began to fall, canceling any further photo runs on the trip back to Denver. With all in readiness, Lynn starts the injector. This will stay on for the duration of the trip upgrade to the summit at Sherman. The injector supplies water to the boiler. Moving slowly, the engine negotiates several crossovers as it departs the yard and enters the main line. Cab whistles signal the train's entry into each track block. Once the engine has cleared the crossovers, Steve Lee widens out on the throttle as the battle upgrade begins. As the engine picks up speed, Mr. Lee changes the setting on the Johnson bar. This reduces the amount of stroke to the valves in the cylinders, allowing the steam to be used more efficiently and moving the engine faster. With the throttle substantially open, Fireman Nystrom pours sand into the firebox opening. The tremendous draft created when an engine is working hard pulls the sand through the fire tubes at a high velocity. This scours the tubes, removing excess soot which is pulled out of the stack along with the exhaust. This procedure is necessary to remove soot buildup, which hampers the steaming capabilities of the boiler. The engine speedometer indicates the train is gradually accelerating up the hill. This is the view forward from the engineer's seat. Notice how the smoke deflectors impair the forward view for the engineer and fireman. Although deflectors were effective in helping to keep smoke out of the cabs, they severely limited a crew's forward vision. The train's speed has reached its maximum of 38 miles per hour as the engine battles the 0.82% grade on number 2 track eastbound. This is the normal routing for eastbound trains over Sherman Hill. Interesting rock formations can be seen as the train rolls through the rugged Wyoming countryside. Using his firing expertise, Lynn Nystrom has kept the boiler pressure at its maximum of 275 pounds for the entire trip up the hill. A whistle in the cab indicates the train is nearing a crossover, which the engine will have to negotiate at a reduced speed before entering Hermosa Tunnel. In response, Engineer Lee makes a brake application and cuts back on the throttle. He also slips the Johnson bar forward as the train's speed drops for the approach to Hermosa Tunnel. Although the tunnel is only a quarter-mile long, it is necessary for the engine to work through the tunnel because of the grade. With hands in the air, Steve Lee signals that it is now Lynn Nystrom's responsibility to control the amount of smoke in the tunnel. Steve will not touch any of the throttle or control valve settings until after they exit the east end of the tunnel. In a flurry of activity, the cab windows are closed for the upcoming tunnel. Hermosa Tunnel is one of two parallel bores, each 1,827 feet long. Notice how the cab quickly fills with smoke and steam as the engine blasts through the tunnel at 25 miles per hour. You can imagine what it was like in the cab of a coal-burning big boy locomotive pulling a heavy freight through the tunnel at 8 to 10 miles per hour. Exiting the tunnel, the track levels out, increasing train speed. Rocks, shrubs, snow fences, and diverging Track 3 can be seen in the background as the train rolls east from Dale Junction. Climbing again, the engine is working the last few miles of grade to the summit at Sherman. The flues are sanded one last time, while the uphill trip still provides enough draft to accomplish the task. As the engine crests the summit at the 8,013-foot elevation, the throttle is shut off and the train begins its descent to Spear. At Spear, the train will stop for a crew change. The remainder of the trip will be in darkness, with the excursion train arriving back in Denver at 11:15 p.m. No complaints were heard, however, as this exciting and well-executed trip was enjoyed by all. On Sunday, May 16th, another Union Pacific Challenger has appeared in the Denver Intermodal Yard. The smiles on the faces of the crew members indicate they're having a lot of fun this morning as confused rail fans look on. No Challenger engine was ever assigned the number 3718. If Challenger 3985 had been converted to oil during its career, it more than likely would have been renumbered 3718. For at least one day, befuddled rail fans will be scratching their heads as the engine races by. Even with the early hour on Sunday morning, a small group of curious spectators is on hand to witness the train's departure from Denver. Today, the train will be ferried back to Cheyenne, the base of operations for the Union Pacific steam program. Departing Denver, the 3718 meets an inbound freight waiting to enter the yard. Leaving Greeley, Colorado, the 3718 picks up speed as it heads north. Just over the Wyoming border, the fireman sands the flues of the 3718 as the engine works upgrade south of Spear. Arriving at the Cheyenne yard, the 3718 uncouples from its train and heads down the approach track to the shop building. Engineer Steve Lee reflects on the 40th anniversary steam excursion and the continuing relationship with the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club.
It was kind of a joint idea. The steam crew and some of the UP Historical Society members became aware a couple of years ago that the 40th anniversary of this, what we call the first steam excursion, was upon us, was coming up. We kicked the idea around a little bit, looked at the calendar. We noticed we couldn't run the trip on the same day, but with the Rocky Club still in Denver, we contacted them to see if they'd be interested in sponsoring it if we wanted to run it. And we worked it out with them so that we could recreate the trip as close as we possibly could and re-letter and renumber the locomotive and kind of take a step back in time. I was well satisfied with everything as far as the Rocky Club. They did their usual good job with the ticket sales, the promotion, with the crewing of the train, the handling of the photo lines, and the crowd control and all that. They've been running trips for more than 40 years, and they've got the drill pretty well down. They did a very nice job. We were disappointed in the weather, of course, all the rain and the doom and gloom, but there's not much anybody can do about that. And we had some operational difficulties as far as some delays, not due to the locomotive or the train or anything like that, but pretty well I was pleased, yes.
We asked Steve where he got all those Challenger engines.
We got a little shop over there in the roundhouse. We make them during the winter when we don't have anything else to do. Yeah, this is probably the first time a Challenger has been south of LaSalle and on into Denver, probably since about 56 or 57. They stopped running them down there in the late 50s when they stopped running steam altogether. We've had the 3985 down to LaSalle twice since it's been restored. We took it down there in 81 on its initial break-in trip, and we took it down there about 2 years ago on another break-in trip, but we've never had it south of LaSalle. So yeah, it's been quite some time since any kind of a Challenger has been down there.
Do you think anyone could have predicted the running of this trip 20 years ago?
I think 20 years ago, no one would have seriously predicted that a Challenger would even be restored. Much less do this. No, I don't think, even a year ago, I don't think it would have been predicted. It's a pleasant feeling. You're kind of recreating history. The best moment for me was over at Laramie when they got the folks that had ridden the trip 40 years ago and lined them up in front of the engine, and here it is 40 years later, the same locomotive number and the same fellas, and that really brought it home how long it had been, and that was pleasant.
As the locomotive enters its stall in the Cheyenne shop, Pentrex concludes its coverage of this historic three-day railroading event. This was an unusual happening that will probably never be duplicated. Once in the shop, the smoke wings and the temporary number plates will be removed, and the 3985 will once again have its own identity. Steve Lee and his crew, the Union Pacific Railroad, and the members of the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club are to be commended for their diligent efforts toward the success of the 40th anniversary steam excursion.